So while I'm less busy during this global shutdown, I thought it might be a fun idea to upload some more YouTube videos. One thing that I really enjoy is reading, especially when I'm at home. I've got lots of time. So I thought I'd share my top 10 books from last year that I read. So if you're looking for some good book recommendations where you're spending some more time at home if you're in quarantine, then I hope this will help. So last year I read around 39 books in total across like Audible, physical books, Kindle, and these are my top 10 books ordered in rough order of my least favourite to my favourite, with number 1 obviously being the favourite. So the first book on my list, which is number 10, is Total Recall by Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm not like a massive Arnold fan. I never really have been. I've seen a few of his movies, you know, the classics, but I just thought it would be really interesting to read more about him and find out about his life. And definitely he's got a fascinating life. And the one thing that I really enjoyed learning about from the book was just the importance of like social connections. I think that's what Arnold is really good at. He's really good at just getting to know people. Even early in his career, he always was meeting new people and making connections, and that's how a lot of his opportunities came about. So I think it's something really important for me to remember, is to make sure I make the most of social opportunities and to get out there more and to meet more people. So the next book on my list, which is number 9, is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And this is an old classic. It's been around for a long time. And I put off reading it for ages because I thought it might be a bit cliche and outdated now. But I was actually really surprised. It was a really good book. It's got some really solid techniques, practical advice on just how to make more connections and to really connect with people better. And I think for me as an introvert, I just tend to be really lazy and I just don't bother making connections because I just can't be bothered. I'd rather just be at home reading a book. But I think this gave me some really good insight and advice on how to, you know, get out there more and to really connect with people on a really genuine level. So yeah, I highly recommend this book if you're looking for just some ways on improving your social skills and being able to connect with people more genuinely. So number 8 on my list is another memoir or biography book. It's called Permanent Record by Edward Snowden. I bought it like 2 weeks after it came out just because it's a topic that really interests me. So if you don't know, Edward Snowden is basically a whistleblower from the US government, and he told everyone about how the US government was basically using the internet to spy on people from all around the world. So they were hacking into people's computers, phones, devices, and just accessing anything and everything about them, basically illegally, and contravening all sorts of human rights. And it's kind of his story of how he discovered it and decided to tell everyone at risk of going up against the US government. I think it's just a fascinating read, so interesting. It made me really reconsider what I put online and the way I share things and social media and the information that's out there. So I highly recommend. It will definitely make you think twice about deleting a Facebook. So number 7 is another kind of social skills book, which is called How to Lead When You're Not in Charge by Clay Scroggins. And I just found it a really good practical book with lots of really good practical advice that you can immediately go out and apply on how to have influence in your social circles or in your workplace or whatever, when you don't have an official title or position. It doesn't only cover just techniques, it also covers like the mindset you need to have to be able to influence and lead people when you don't have a title. And I just think it's got some really good advice, so I highly recommend that one. Number 6 is the book that I think I found the hardest to put down last year out of all the books I read. And that one's called American Kingpin by Nick Bilton. Now, it's a book that's fiction in the sense that Nick Bilton didn't actually know the people involved and wasn't there for all the conversations. So he wrote them all fictitiously without actually knowing the real conversations, but all the events that took place are true. And it's basically the story of this guy, Ross Ulbricht, who started this website called the Silk Road, which is basically an online black marketplace that sold all sorts of illegal goods. And he started it way back in 2011 when the internet was really booming, and Bitcoin started to take off. And it's basically just such a fascinating read about how he started it and how he grew it, and then conversely the story of the government agents who were trying to track him down and capture him. I mean, it's just such a fascinating read. It will definitely keep you on the edge of your seat the entire time. So if you're looking for a real kind of thriller, exciting true crime book, this is definitely one to read. So number 5 is somewhat related to the previous one, and it's called Chasing the Scream by Johann Hari. So the book basically discusses the global war on drugs and kind of questions whether it's been effective and whether it's actually made a difference or whether it's made things worse. And he kind of makes the case really well, I think, that the war on drugs really hasn't helped, and definitely has made things worse for drug addicts, for crime, and for society as a whole. And he presents different arguments on alternative solutions other than just trying to ban and prosecute all use and sales of drugs. It really changed my perspective on everything in terms of the war on drugs. And it's just a super interesting book. Again, it was something that I found really hard to put down. So this next book at number 4 really helped me and my business partner in our business. It's called Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. And essentially all it does is just shows you how to organize your accounts in a way that really helps you see where your money's going and better utilize the cash that comes into your accounts. And for us, it just made such a huge difference. We implemented it pretty much straight away as soon as we read the book. And since then, it's made such a huge difference. We can see easily where our money's going, where it's going out to. We can plan better with our cash. And it's just made such a huge difference to our business. So if you're looking to improve the profitability or the efficiency of your own business, then I definitely recommend this book. It's really good. So number 3 was the book that I think I just got most pure enjoyment out of. It was just such an enjoyable read. And that was called The Crossroad by Mark Donaldson. And it's basically a story of this guy who grew up in Australia in kind of similar circumstances to myself. So I think that's part of the reason why it really resonated with me. But it's kind of his story of how he grew up and then eventually joined the SAS, which is kind of like the Australian Army equivalent of the American SEALs. And it's just such an interesting insight into the army and the military and how that all works and kind of the mindset of the people who are in the military. And I just think it kind of made war a lot more real to me. I think, again, because it was coming from someone who has a very similar background to me, and hearing his perspective on it, I found it really easy to sort of connect with him and sort of understand where he was coming from and his thoughts on war. And the negative parts of it, the parts of the military that he really loved, and just the story overall. It's just such an really interesting book. Highly recommend it if you're looking for something just kind of like interesting to read, something that you can sort of relate to. It's a really human story. It's very vulnerable in it. I really enjoyed it. So the second best book that I read last year was Rule Number 1 by Phil Town. Now, kind of early last year, I decided to get more into investing again. I've sort of dabbled in it in the past, but I really wanted to get back into it a bit more seriously again. And I sort of stumbled across it through a podcast, and it's just honestly probably the best investing book I've ever read. Just like, it gives you such a really good foundation in how to invest, like people such as Warren Buffett or Guy Spear. And I think for me, it's just the most logical, structured, well thought out, and sort of easy to comprehend philosophy of stock market investing in particular that I've ever read. And I just think it's sort of opened a whole new world to me. I've read a whole bunch of other books since then in the same sort of investing philosophy, and I've just been loving it. And I've been since getting more into investing, so highly recommend it if you're looking for more investing books to read. So finally, last but not least, the best book I think I read last year, and it's probably not so much out of enjoyment, but just how much I appreciated what I got from it, was Prayer by Timothy Keller. And I love pretty much anything Timothy Keller says or puts out in books or writes, but this in particular, I think it really changed my perspective on prayer and the way I pray. I think one of the most valuable things I got out of it was he really goes through how to pray scripture, which I'd never really, funnily enough, heard about or had explained to me before. And I've just since then I've found that so valuable. Like, it has made such a difference to my prayer life. And I think, to me that's super important. So I highly recommend that book if you're looking for more insight into prayer. So those are my favourite books from last year that I read. I've definitely got quite a few more on my list to get through this year. But let me know if you've read any of those books and what your thoughts were, if you liked them or disliked them. And please let me know, like, if you've got any more book recommendations. I'm always on the lookout for a new book to read. So other than that, feel free to leave a like, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video very soon.